Hey, everybody. This is SIC Talks number 71. Welcome back. It's a special 2 talks in 1 week because we're doing the big interview only newsletter. This week, my guest today is Jacob Donnelly. Oh my God. You'd think after talking for all this time, you'd be able to pronounce really naturally pronounceable word. Jacob Donnelly from a media operator. We'll get that straight.
I still spell my first name Jacon when I'm typing my email too fast. So
fantastic. Anyway, Jacob is the major domo at a media operator, which is a newsletter and burgeoning media business covering the media industry, the publishing industry. Jacob was until recently the publisher and the head of the B2B operation at Morning Brew, the very successful, super scaled morning email brands, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But in the meantime, what he's doing is what I would call insider's analysis of the media business from a ground up level. And that means understanding the monetization, understanding the structure, understanding where the trends are going, the blank spaces and the places that new opportunities are being fomented, dead models that are in the process of slowly going the way of the dodo, et cetera. It's fascinating reading. You don't have to be a media expert to understand it, although it helps obviously to have a few shared references. And I just wanted him to come on because media is a part of SIC every week. And it's the business that I come from and pay a lot of attention to, but it's also, I think, a microcosm for how the economy generally is changing from a more institutional and more scaled set of operations to ones that may be more driven by individuals or small scale or right size, if you want to call it that. So anyway, welcome, Jacob. Very pleased to have you here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you bringing me on and glad we could finally do it. I think when you first asked me to do it, I didn't have any audio panels on the ceilings. This room was echoey as all hell. So I'm glad that we finally got it all figured out because you would not have liked recording back in January when you first asked.
Well, I appreciate the consideration, and I'm glad to hear you're making advancements to the stage. I am the world's most amateur podcaster. The fact that I have this microphone is due only to a friend, business partner in Culture Club who sent it to me basically because he was like, "It's important that you sound better." So, welcome, warts and all. We love all of this stuff. But Jacob, tell me a little bit about how did you get going as a media operator in particular, like as a let's call it a side hustle or a passion project or whatever. Was it a COVID thing or was it something else? Was it something you've been thinking about for a while?
So I launched AMO back in August 2019. At the time I was, what was my title at CoinDesk? I had 3 different managing director titles in 1 year.
Wow.
I don't know, do with that as you will.
Highly accomplished young man over here is what's going on.
Or as I referred to a woman who used to work for me, I told her that our department were the janitors at CoinDesk, in that you just brought us in to fix things when things didn't work, and that meant they kept giving us different titles. And so while I was there, we were building the business. We went from 8 people, scaled up, business grew really big, followed the crypto markets. And I sort of looked at my career and said, which direction do I want to go? Right. I could either go way down the crypto path, and look, I've been in crypto since 2013. Right. So
I was going to ask. So you're already you've broken through the Earth's atmosphere and you're almost all the way to the moon now.
I still work in media, so all right, let's be clear there. And look, like I was a freelance reporter covering crypto before I went full time at CoinDesk. Like I really understood this stuff, and so I was like, all right, I can either do one of 2 things. I can go way deeper into crypto, which then I would be on Mars right now, or I could go and focus like my attention's on media, and my passion was just in media. And I'm not a naturally good networker. I'm not good at talking to people. Unless it's like these sort of conversations, right?
Sure.
One-on-one, I'm pretty good. But what I've always been good at is writing. I did my first freelance writing job as a 17-year-old, doing SEO writing for really crap made for Google AdSense sites.
Wow.
And so, I was always good at writing. And so I launched the newsletter as my place to put my thoughts out on how to build sustainable media companies. My hope was.
Could I just stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
Was that because this was? So I'm sorry. Now that we're getting through the chronology, this is pre Morning Brew.
This is pre Morning Brew. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So never mind. I withdraw the question. I'll come back to it in a second.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Because look, there was nothing else out there, right? Like there was Digiday, but Digiday is very focused on a certain type of publisher. It's very focused on programmatic advertising, and
Yep.
I have not historically believed, or especially more recently, don't believe that's a long-term future for media companies. And so I wanted
We're in the same boat on that one. Yeah.
So I wanted a place where I could talk about how I thought you should build sustainable media businesses. And my hope was people would reach out to me. And I would meet other people trying to do the same thing. I didn't intend on monetizing it. I didn't intend on it becoming a business. I literally launched it in one day. I wrote my first piece before my girlfriend even knew what I was doing. And then I started getting people telling me that I should charge. They kept saying, "This is really good. Why are you not charging?
Yeah.
Why are you giving it away for free?" And then when I was at CoinDesk, as the business grew, our CEO had, 15 direct reports. And so he needed to hire, he needed to put a level in between. And so I reported into a newly hired president. Our CEO at the time had given me permission to do AMO. President hadn't given me permission because he didn't know about it. And I didn't want to have to ask to charge and make a side business. So I quickly turned on paid subscriptions before he started, and there the business went.
Well,
grandfather me in.
No. Look, I mean, it's a sort of a similar thing. It's like we were saying off mic. The way that SIC started was as a internal database for Vice. Its original name was Sharing is Caring. Very tongue firmly in cheek there, but that was the idea, was just to circulate information. But what I was going to ask was I think I probably got on to your newsletter pretty early. I'm sure I must have seen it cited someplace else because you and I didn't know each other at that point. But I got onto it pretty early, and its value and the level of interestingness in it was clear from moment one. It surprised me then hearing about you moving around between media companies that none of the media companies had said to you, "Hey, if you can manage to do this and do your regular job, why don't you bring this under the umbrella?" Was that ever a discussion?
Not at CoinDesk, because CoinDesk was 100% crypto. And Morning Brew, my origin story there was Austin and Alex, the co-founders of that company. They read AMO. And Austin actually bought the very first group subscription for his executive team to read AMO. And so I started getting to know those guys, and we would meet up for coffee, or we'd meet up for, I went to their office once and gave a talk on SEO because they were a newsletter business. They didn't know anything about SEO. And we just started talking. And in the summer of 2020, Austin reached out to me and asked me about joining Morning Brew. Originally, he had asked me about like a product manager job, and I told him, look, like, I'm probably going to leave CoinDesk at some point and just go focus on building my own thing. And so like doing a PM job, it's just not really the thing for me.
Yeah, sure.
He's like, cool. Let me know when you go out to do your own thing. I'll invest in you. About 8 weeks later, he came back to me and said, I have a better idea. Why don't you be our GM of B2B at Morning Brew? We think this business could be big. Why don't you come and join us? And he and I went back and forth a number of times where I told him, no, like, I want to go do my own thing. And he was like, look, like, you can do your own thing. And I respect that. Obviously he did it. Right. He goes, but like, this is going to be a good opportunity. Like, we're going to build this thing and all that. And I said that I would be interested, but under no circumstances was I A, shutting AMO down, and B, was I going to roll it into Morning Brew. And he was completely understanding of that. And so like my employment contract said that. We were very clear about that. And look, it would have never made sense for AMO to be part of Morning Brew, because Morning Brew's business model is even in the B2B business, is more of a scale advertising business, right? Every newsletter there has got at least 100,000 subscribers on the B2B side.
Right.
AMO today has 6,100 subscribers. Free subscribers, right? And then a percentage of that are paid. Yeah, we wouldn't have known how to monetize that at Morning Brew. So it never would have made sense to roll that in.
Yeah, I get that, but I also, to me, thought leadership, which is a cursed term, but is a very real thing, like is incredibly important, and particularly in B2B environments, because what you need to be able to demonstrate is that the people giving you advice and providing perspective actually know what they're talking about, as opposed to simply are conveying news that I don't know what like drives the most advertising impressions. So it surprises me a little bit. That being said, business models are business models, and people like them and they stick to them and they work. So fine, fair enough. It was I was always curious about that, because I wondered whether you were hidebound on your trajectory to independence, or whether you were just sort of not paid attention to, like the value of that wasn't being paid attention to. So, and now I know the answer. It was you.
We all knew. I mean, Austin told me. So at the time, I was thinking about launching a second company, because even back in 2020, I was like, I don't think AMO is going to be a real business. It might be a nice little side hustle. My goal was to go launch a media company about the business of space. And
oh, wow.
I was trying to prepare that. And one of the things Austin said to me was, listen, Jacob, come help build this B2B business. And when we're done, I will invest in your space aliens, rockets, whatever that company is called. I'll invest in it. And so like,
space aliens, rockets.
That's what we're going to call it.
Presumably you've got that URL all set. Like
I do. He's wired the money. No, I'm joking. But like the point there is like, he knew all along that he was hiring someone who wanted to build their own thing. Like he was not blind to that. He understood that like I was not going to be, at least I assume he understood, because I was pretty clear that I was not going to be a career Morning Brew person. I wasn't going to be there till I was 70 years old, right? Like this was a journey.
Sure.
It was going to be a fun journey, and I had a blast doing it. I don't regret doing it in the slightest. But that at some point I was going to do my own thing.
Yeah. Got it. And then you broke out and went AMO only around the turn of the year this year. Is that right? Maybe a little bit before?
Yeah, I wrapped up everything at Morning Brew at the end of last year. Took a week off, and then went full steam ahead on AMO.
Generous self-care time.
Listen, my boss is an absolute jerk.
Deep wellness. I'm so pleased, by the way, as a let's call it an older guy, that you didn't use the word manager to describe your boss. I think there are a bunch of words, and this is a digression, but I'll just say them, that I really think are a scourge in our business and just business generally. Manager is one, client is another, because even the podcast machine hates.
They agree with clients.
For those who are listening, we just got a balloon bubble when I said that I hated the word client. But because what they are is disintermediations of like relationship and responsibility to one another, right? Like when in a client-centric business, when somebody says client asked for something, or we need to deliver it to client, or whatever it is, what they're really saying is, I need to absolve myself of this responsibility as quickly as possible. So let me blame someone else, or let me offload it to somebody else. And I feel like manager get used the same way. Whereas boss is a little bit more direct, right? It's like there is a level of accountability there that I think is, I don't know, it just resonates with me more. So thank you for using my preferred term.
I just don't actually like managers. Like one of the things I've kind of realized, especially having.
Do you mean as a level, or?
Yeah, as a level.
Okay, got it. Okay, talk about that. What do you mean?
So, scaling a team, and you hire people and you grow, and that's exciting and all that. But I don't think really any company at our scale, should be having people whose sole job is managing people. Like that is an expensive proposition. And I think that it's something I've really thought a lot about, especially as I think about AMO, and AMO at some point will bring people on. I would rather spend more money for really good, strong self-starters who are individual contributors than people whose sole job is managing. You could make an argument that executives are people who only manage, but like an executive's job is also a strategic job. Like
That's
they
right.
are setting a direction. And so like once you go one level down where like the person's job is just, one-on-ones and making sure people are doing their jobs and all that. Instead, like that, I just don't. I find that to be very exhausting. And I also think, and look, it's a statement that like people will say is controversial. They'll tell me that
not on this,
maybe not
in
here.
this conversation. It's not, no.
But if you look at Facebook and Google and these big companies that let go of thousands and thousands of people, why is it they didn't miss a beat with product development? Yeah, they didn't miss a beat.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, you could even argue that they have been slowed incrementally or more than that by just the sort of morass of people, which is a not a particularly cheery way of looking at the future of the labor market, but it is. It's an indictment of the way of organizing in that fashion that I think is coming.
Yeah. And look, I think the reason that people want to become managers is because they want to make more money. And I get that, right? Like I certainly wanted to be a manager for the same reason, but I actually think that what would be better for businesses is if they removed the caps on salary increases for individual contributors and just rewarded the best people. Like, if you've got someone who absolutely crushes it, but they just don't manage anyone, but they're just delivering value, then pay them.
Yeah.
Irrespective of the title. So anyway, that's my rant on manager.
Okay, so your rant on manager, uncontroversial in this conversation, controversial potentially elsewhere, but I would imagine that as we see the wheels come off the bus of the scale digital media properties of the last 15 years, in a lot of which has to do with the fact that I think those companies and certainly Vice was guilty of this, tried to institute some of the practices of larger companies because there was a perception that like this is the way big companies do it. I would imagine you will find more and more people who share the opinion that you hold and I agree with, which is that there's just too much in the middle, and that these companies can operate much more sort of productively. Never mind efficiency, never mind scale wise, but they can operate much more productively with far fewer people than was the orthodoxy previously. You, because of AMO, talk to operators all the time. Are you hearing that from them, or is there a counter narrative that where people want to build the big thing because they've been raised in the big thing and that's what the big thing looks like?
I think I'm recognizing that there's a lot less desire for people for the sake of people. Right. Like I definitely don't think that, like, I think that was a zero interest rate phenomena, right? Like because money was cheap. And so let's just like, we want to put out there are three things we want to tell the world. One, we want to tell the world that we raised a boatload of money, a completely useless thing. Two, we want to tell the world how many people we have on the team, a completely useless thing. And three, we want to tell the world how much top line revenue we are making, a completely useless thing, without qualifying what is your margin, right? Those three things are all anyone wants to talk about, and none of them matter because none of them actually go to the bottom line, which is profit. And that is the only thing that matters for media companies. A lot of the media companies that I talk to today that are not your typical VC-backed, New York-based, scale for the scale's sake media company, they don't want to hire more people if they don't have to, right? That doesn't mean that they're not going to, but they will do it in reaction to sustainable, profitable growth. We think that we can expand profitably into this new sector, right? Launch a publication about a new industry. Okay, we'll do that, and we will bring on people for that. But they're not looking to do it for the sake of it. There's a lot of ego in media. Media is one of the most egotistical industries out there. And the decisions that are made are often because of really stupid people being given a lot of money to do really stupid things. Like just preposterously stupid things. Yeah.
I don't disagree. I do have a question though that sort of to understand better how you situate yourself there. 6,100. You said 6,100 subscribers to AMO, a percentage of which are paid, but that is not um, that's not a media business, I would imagine. And correct me if I'm wrong, please. That you could, is going to be sustainable, is going to pay for, the lifestyle to which you've become accustomed over the course of time. It probably, though, is a really effective front door for other lines of business, right? You recently convened an event that was ticketed, that had hundreds of people show up for what I understand were very heated and productive discussions. Heated, maybe is the wrong word, but lively and productive discussions. I would imagine you probably have, or at least have had the opportunity to offer some sort of consulting thing on the side to companies as they grow. You may have retainers with past employers, this sort of stuff. How do you view AMO in terms of its growth towards profitability as a standalone business unit within Jacob Donnelly Inc.? Or will it always be a loss leader that opens up avenues for the other things? Or what? Like, where do you see that trajectory going?
So a media operator last year, I'm always happy to pull back the curtain and talk about numbers.
Cool.
Media operator last year, as a side business, generated about $310,000 in revenue. After
That's
my
awesome.
COGS for the event, after operating expenses, which I don't have a lot of operating expenses because it's just me and I had a salary at the time. The business generated about $190,000 in profit.
Okay.
So that gets it's an S corp, so that gets passed through to my personal taxes. I get taxed on that, but because it's an S corp, I can do contribution to a retirement account as a write-off, whatever. This year, AMO, by the end of Q1, we are at about $180,000 in top line revenue.
Wow.
That is,
and that's without, just to clarify, that's without the event.
Correct.
There's been no event this year yet, so that's correct. Purely from the subscriptions and the ancillary. Business. Right. Oh, and the ad business, sure.
Yeah. So the ad business is a big chunk of that revenue right now. I've got a number of great partners who believe that the audience is the right audience for them, and it is, right? Like I show them who the audience is. I have the data.
Sure.
And so they spend good money. I do have a couple of consulting things. They are small pieces of the pie, but they do exist. I suspect I've generated a low 5 figures this year so far in advisory work. Subscriptions exists, and then the event will be, it has to be a much bigger success than it was last year because I'm moving venues. The cost of that event is going to be significantly greater. But I think the thing to understand is everything that I'm building for AMO, right? Whether it's whether I'm doing advisory work, whether there's an event, whether there is newsletter ads, subscriptions, it's all tied to this central audience, right? I deliver value to the audience, and the audience that I can then monetize them in a number of different ways. And that is how all niche media companies work. If you look at any B2B media company, right, they will offer advertising and marketing services. Some of them will do subscriptions, right? The best ones will. Or, if the best ones don't do it, it's because their model is to scale into multiple industries, and therefore they don't want to add a new rev line like Morning Brew or say an industry dive. So first is advertising and marketing services. Second is subscriptions. The third is standard and event. Events are great businesses. They can be very high margin. They can be somewhat cash friendly because you put deposits down, but then get your sponsorship dollars in before you owe the rest of the money. And so they can be potentially cash friendly. And then there are some media companies now that offer advisory businesses, right? There's a media company called Skift, which is in the travel business, where they will do advisory and consulting work for travel companies. Sure. All because they have that core audience understanding.
Yeah. And look, I think that's, part of the struggle that I always had with, let's call it capital J journalism, particularly like Vice, when Vice got big and we were, double, triple, quadruple down in news in particular, was this sense that like the business outside of advertising driven, page view generative journalism was dirty business and in some way like diminished the quality of or the importance of the journalism. And I've always thought that was untrue, and I've always thought that was a counterproductive way to look at the business. Similarly, anything that the business side does that diminishes the ability of the editorial brand to reach the audience, to establish that credibility, is also hurting itself and doing itself a disservice, right? Like any short-term thinking on any of these parts is a disaster. So yeah, I don't even know what my question. I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you that that's the way I think, and I see what you're doing as really interesting. The part that I find fascinating, though, is that with a pretty constrained audience right now, you're generating a lot of advertising revenue, and I say that because CPMs, which is the traditional way that people might buy advertising through a digital media vehicle, right? That's cost per thousand eyeballs, so to speak. In the newsletter business are not high enough at all to generate the sorts of numbers that you're doing unless you're charging very, very premium CPMs, right? Like $1,000 CPMs or something to that effect. If you are getting that, God bless you, because that's where everybody else needs to be. And I have this conversation with publishers all the time saying, like, you are influencing huge swaths of audience and opinion, and you're getting peanuts. But I wonder whether you have a different structure that basically says that's short-sighted and is not the way I want to operate.
Any marketer can backdoor into the CPM when they sponsor the newsletter. I don't charge it that way, right? I have just had a sponsorship rate that I incrementally increase depending on the newsletter size. There's no real science to it.
Right.
The secret to B2B media, which is why I always struggle with more people not wanting to get into it, is if you have a highly engaged audience in B2B media, these are people who have decision-making ability over massive budgets. And media is a horrible industry to run a B2B media company in, right? Like I'm AMO is like it has the potential to be a 7-figure business, but like $2, $3, maybe $4 million a year, right? It's not going to become an 8-figure business. I don't see that path. There are industries out there where you can build like legitimate 8-figure revenue businesses with like strong 30% margins in great industries. Like those exist. And the reality is you don't need a big audience. What you need is the right audience. 40% of my audience are C-suite, right? And so I can go to an advertiser and say, you were going to get in front of this, like the C-suite level people at these media companies, small ones, big ones. Like I can tell them that. And so when you can tell that story, where else are they going to get that? Where else are they going to get that with the context of my content?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think the part that is head scratching for me is that other publishers of similar sorts of products, right? Like let's call it newsletter based, or at the very least newsletter centric, don't have the sort of confidence and the wherewithal to distill down those points and then attribute the right amount of value to it. And I wonder whether you're seeing anybody come into the space and sort of start to aggregate those publishers. I mean, a sort of like federated model where they go, we've got a bunch of people who are making very influential, publications, but are not aggregating their value correctly, and are, trying to create new roll-ups like that.
I suspect it'll happen. The issue is a lot of these newsletters are still pretty small, right?
Yeah.
Like from an M&A perspective, acquiring a very small asset can be risky because there's not a ton of EBITDA that gets kicked off, or cash flow that gets kicked off. So you can't use that to hire people to run that business. And if there is enough, if it's still subscale, how many partners are you getting that money from, right? Is it 30 partners or is it 3 partners? If it's 3 partners, well, what happens if one of those partners cancels, right? Look, that's one of the risks for AMO, right?
Yeah,
a large percentage of my revenue, comes from one partner. They've been a great partner for years, but like they are a larger percentage, and that is a risk, which is why the subscription business is so important for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think the issue for a lot of these newsletters, people inherently think bigger is better. right? And so
Yeah.
their natural instincts are to pick topics that they can scale, get bigger, get to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of subscribers. The issue is if it's that easy to get 100,000 subscribers, anyone can do it. And if anyone can do it, that's going to compress the CPMs.
Yes.
I don't think what is it? It's me, it's Brian Morrissey. Like, who else understands the media business and can write about it? There's not that many people.
No. I could agree. And I would say you and Brian are my two favorites and the most credible, I think. And the two of you are doing it in a way that doesn't feel like you're doing it as a vanity project or a growth hack or something like that. Like we're
trying to build businesses.
Yeah, exactly. Which I appreciate and respect tremendously. So, all right, to pause and to sort of shift gears for a second, the ostensible reason for this conversation each week is that it tracks or complements the links in the newsletter. Now, this is a special week with the newsletter, as I was explaining to you. A lot fewer links, mostly conversation. So there's nothing really for us to refer to. But the underlying question is the same, which is, what are you paying attention to this week or recently that you just find interesting in the news cycle, right? It could be a development within the media business that you cover. It could be, I don't know what, like the raid on Diddy's home. I hope we don't have to talk about that, but it could be. You know what I mean? It could be a favorite pair of shoes that you got because of an interesting article in Spreza, a newsletter that I happen to like.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I want to get it out just because I'm obsessed about it right now. I just finished watching Netflix's Three Body Problem.
Interesting. Okay, cool. I haven't seen it yet.
It's great, right? Some people are offended because...
Well, just before you go any further, how much do I have to be like emotionally invested in the idea of spacealienrockets.com?
You don't.
To...
Look, let's just be clear, and I don't know if there's like a PG rating for this or whatever. It is a fucked up show.
There is not, yeah. Okay.
Like,
oh, really?
It is a fucked up show. Like, it is made by the guys who made Game of Thrones. So expect similar levels of gore. Expect that. But I find that it did a really good job. They took the 3 books and they have effectively created an origin series. I thought it was great, and I wanted to say that because like I have wanted to talk about it with somebody, and so I'm saying that out loud to you. Watch it if you want. If you haven't read the books, read the books. Great science fiction.
Interesting. Okay, cool. It's funny you should say that because not that you know this, but I have a 17-year-old and I have a 14-year-old. My 17-year-old is going off to college to study film, and has been really taken by Dune. In the last couple of weeks, and asked for the books, which is a first because him taking on, like paperback or paper bound reading at that scale has not been a typical behavior, and so I want to find other things to recommend to him. So the Three Body Problem books.
It is great science fiction. It is a mind fuck, and each book gets more mind fucky, right? Like. But it's great hard science fiction. So like it is all believable science fiction. It's not like, I love Star Wars, but it's not like Star Wars where you got like space wizards and magic powers and all that. Like it's legitimate.
No ornithopters.
No
ornithopters.
But no, it is good stuff. I thought the show was really well done, really well produced. People are upset about it a little bit because like, in the books, everyone is Asian. Everyone is Chinese because it takes place in China.
Got it.
So now suddenly you have a black person who is in the books an Asian person. And so I think that there's some like, people get offended by that sort of stuff. I couldn't care less. Like I just give me good content. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that. Or I wanted to get that out there because I needed to say it to somebody. And so
how many Netflix, how many episodes?
It's 8 episodes for the first season. Okay. It ends on a cliffhanger, so I'm hoping that they will do a second season.
Does the first season, does it correspond to the first book, for instance, or is it some other orientation?
It corresponds to the beginning of of all 3 books. So
interesting. Okay.
Each book has like different characters that are introduced, and they basically took all of those characters and introduced them all in the first book. and made them all interconnected with each other, whereas they were not all interconnected before. And so that they've introduced that concept, and then obviously as the next book happens or the next season happens, we'll start to see those storylines shoot off.
Got it. Is the and because I know nothing about it at all, is the author involved? Is the author still alive? Is this
the author he gave his blessing. I'm not sure how involved. I think he is somewhat involved. He gave his blessing because these are the Game of Thrones creators where they needed to you need to restructure things that what works in book might not work on screen. And so now all the source material is done, so we won't have like a last season of Game of Thrones where they just completely went off the rails. So at least I hope they won't do that.
Well, part of the reason that I was asking is like the blessing and the curse of uniting these storylines and putting everybody in the same sort of interrelated universes that you can then theoretically break them out into myriad different possibilities once you've told the established story. And I just wasn't sure whether it in a culture where we MCU everything.
Oh no, that won't happen.
Good reasons, bad reasons. Yeah, just curious to know.
If you've read if you like science fiction, I recommend reading the books. But if you read the 3 books, like exactly how it ends for all 3 of them. For how it ends for all the characters in the 3 books. So it's great. Each book is better than the last one. It introduces fascinating concepts. It's really, really well done. It answers the question about why have we not found any aliens yet, in a really curious way. So anyway, I know we're talking about media. I needed to get that out there because I need to say something.
No. That's the whole. I mean, look, that's what the newsletter does, right? We start with the prevailing narrative, and we go to fashion, and we go to technology, and we go to media, and we go to marketing, and we go to food. So it's all good. But I am interested to know, like, who's doing it? Coming back to media a little bit, and I like there being corollaries elsewhere. And so the answer to this could be Netflix, for instance. But like in the media landscape as you see it right now, who's doing it really well? Who do you look at and kind of go, this is a model that is durable, if not one that I myself, want to mimic or interrelate to?
So I am a fan of a number of different niche media companies right now. I am a fan of Endpoints News. They got acquired by the Financial Times last year. Is it last year?
Okay.
2 years ago? I'm not sure. They're in the biotech space.
Have they started incorporating into FT at all? Like I follow the FT pretty closely, but I don't know it.
Yeah, FT has a division called FT. I think it's called FT Specialist. And so it's a number of niche publications that are part of the FT family, but actually retain their own branding.
Interesting.
And so Endpoints is one of those, and it is a wholly owned subsidiary or majority owned subsidiary. I suspect there's probably earnouts, if I understand,
Sure.
If I had to guess, where the FT can come in and really give like good advice and obviously guidance on how to build that business. But it's a great biotech publication, great journalism, right? Really great journalism. I'm a fan of Stat News, which is another one of those pharma biotech. I kind of like the life sciences, and so I just find it interesting. So I like that publication. I'm a fan of FreightWaves. FreightWaves is a trucking logistics publication. They also have I guess they recently split the business in 2. FreightWaves started as a website publication serving trucking and logistics. They built a data product. That data product is a massive part of the business, and so they recently split it, where the data product is now its own company, and then FreightWaves is now part of a company called Firecrown. Firecrown is owned by the founder of FreightWaves, and what he has done is he has gone out and bought a bunch of print magazines from various owners in the aerospace and marine industries, primarily consumer. And so he has doubled down on print magazines and is doing it very well.
Interesting. So let me stop you there, because that was what I was wondering about as you went through. Now, all of those are, if not B2B, then at the very least, like industry specific, pretty specialized, pretty, domain of expertise oriented. And I wondered to what extent any of them actually get to consumer audiences by way of extending through B2B, right?
So
Like
Firecrown is predominantly
B2B2C,
consumer.
essentially.
Yeah, so Firecrown is predominantly consumer in
Okay.
that their big magazine is Flying Magazine. It is not a B2B
Sure.
publication. It is for individuals who, like to fly planes. And so that is their target audience. They also own, I believe they own Boating, which is another magazine for people who own boats. And but across the whole portfolio, they own probably 20 different like plane specific brands, depending on what type of plane it is and all that. It's very much consumer. It's high net worth consumer, but it's still consumer. And that's a great model. And look, that is the general thesis of AMO, by the way, is the future of media is going to look like the past. And the past is walk down the newsstand of Barnes and Noble down in, if you live in New York City, in Union Square, right? Like it's a bunch of niche publications. It's only the internet that made media companies think they could scale to infinity. Before that, we all understood that we were going to operate in very tightly focused topics. The internet screwed it all over for us. We all got, again, egotistical and thought that we were going to go to the moon.
Well, interesting you should say that, right? Because I think there is a something of a counterpoint, which is that advertising driven free publications also demonstrated that there was a way to get off the newsstand and still deliver value that was important to advertisers, right? So this is alt weeklies. Vice started out that way, and it doesn't feel like that's a channel that can really come back in a similar fashion. Do you have a take on that?
You mean like free print products?
Mm-hmm.
Why would it? It doesn't work as well for the advertiser.
Well, I mean, I think you could argue Vice's, and this is, getting back to the early days of my time at Vice. Vice's argument was 100% of people, basically the magazines all get picked up. Everybody sees the ads. This is like a saturation level within your key demo. The Village Voice, for instance, never made that argument. The Syracuse New Times, where I grew up, never made that argument. But nonetheless, they were sufficiently lightweight and sufficiently widely distributed in their marketplaces that I think you could claim to advertisers, look, this is everywhere that you want to be within this market.
Because they had geographic monopolies and there was no other way for the advertiser to get to that audience. And so long as that existed, right? And so when Vice was a free distributed print product, how else were you going to find that audience? You weren't. That's the difference. That is what the single thing, let me not say the single thing, right? Because someone's going to come out on social and say, Jacob, no, you're wrong. It's this also thing over here. The big thing that destroyed...
Two things can be true, guys. Let's take that as a fundamental conceit, right?
The big thing that changed for print products, Vice, all the free alt weeklies, even newspapers, is they lost their geographic monopoly over that audience. And so when you lose that, if I want to get in front of people in Seattle, prior to the internet, I had to work with a Seattle TV station, a Seattle radio station, a Seattle print product.
Or the stranger. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now I can get them anywhere because I can geo-target my ads on any website. Yeah. The demand did not keep up with the supply. And so that is why these print alt weeklies won't work as a pure play advertising business, in my opinion, because I can find those people in a much cheaper way unless there is a very hard contextual nature, right? If you can really tie in that the content matters, then maybe it works. It's not a big business, I don't think. You would have to drag me kicking and screaming to move into a free alt weekly type business.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's probably where we end the conversation because that's what I was going to pitch you for the remaining 10 minutes. No, I'm just joking, of course. Yeah, look, I guess the thing that I try to reconcile, and a lot of it has to do with putting my own, trying not to put myself into it while inevitably putting myself into it. My own experience is like, particularly with kids that the ages that I have them, I want them to explore the world through all of the available stimuli that I was able to explore the world, right? And so those free publications had a lot to do with it. The places where those free publications were distributed had a lot to do with it. The information that they held led me to experiences, and all of that stuff currently comes to them through a much more truncated, much more algorithmically driven or optimized, if you want to believe it as such. I personally kind of don't, but because I'm a big believer in the power of serendipity. But I guess I want there to be a viable future there, and so to a certain degree, I'm like gaming out how could it possibly work, right? And it feels to you like it can't.
There's two models, right? Because look, at the end of the day, advertisers, there's a lot of people in media who say to advertisers, you should advertise against our content because it makes our content possible, right? You should advertise because it supports journalism. And I get that, right? And as someone who loves journalism, that resonates with me. It's just factually incorrect.
This is like an NPR / The Guardian /
Not even that. Like you'll see all these media companies who get upset when advertisers put blocks in place to not be around content about terrorism or war or things like that. That's not good. You're doing a disservice to the media company. The media company can't invest in that content if you don't put your ads there. Right. The issue is this. The advertiser's job is not to support journalism. The advertiser's job is to sell their product. The advertiser's job is to put their ad wherever the ad is going to generate the strongest return on that ad spend. That is their job. And we have to understand that. Incentives matter. And so yes. I agree. And Alt Weekly might be fascinating. It might be a great product. It might be culturally interesting. But it probably does not matter to the advertiser because the audience might not be as hyper engaged. Or if they are hyper engaged, the cost for that advertiser might be greater than targeting that same audience somewhere else. We have to understand that those incentives matter. People get their raises and their bonuses based off of how well they do when buying ads. So that's why I don't think it works as an ad business. Now, there are two ways you do it. Either A, you have to charge for the content. So it's got to be a subscription business, which means it's an inherently smaller audience. But like the former Deadspin folk have gone off and done that with sports.
With Defector,
yeah, with Defector, great business, right? None of them are going to get massively rich off of it, but they're going to have sustainable paychecks to go, if this is what they love doing. Or second, it requires a benefactor, right? And perhaps one day we'll go back to an era of the Medici where they pay for beautiful stuff to be made, but you're still operating at the whims of rich people. I don't like to operate the whims of rich people because they are remarkably fickle people. And the last thing I want to do is build a business that is dependent on them changing their mind for any reason. It's so psychological. And so I struggle to see a path for free content
Well, it's
like, yeah.
Well, okay, so I get it. It struck me though that you also didn't shout out some of those like more recently celebrated spin-off publications, the Pucks of the world, the Defectors, the Information, so on and so forth, as being examples of people that are doing it right. What is it? Are they just lower on the list for you, or is there something there that doesn't sit right?
I just didn't think you wanted this episode to just be me naming media companies. Like, if you want, man, we can keep going. I love the information. No, I mean, listen, right?
But that's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was like I love the information. They built an amazing business, right? And great technology coverage, right? A former colleague of mine is now over there as their COO. Like they've done a great job. Actually, a couple colleagues are over there now. Puck is a great business, right? Puck is an example of building a business on the backs of the absolute best reporters in specific coverage areas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like brands, the individual brands carrying the weight. Like it's great business. Punchbowl, they're crushing it. They went from nothing to like $20 million in revenue profitably in like 2 years. Preposterous business, right? Preposterous business. I'm unbelievably envious of that business. To some extent made possible because it is DC dollars. right?
Yeah.
Like we can't that is a
Sure.
great business. You want to talk about high CPMs. On the other hand, though, like great business, and I don't look down on them for that because they're experts at congressional coverage. So no, there are a ton of great. Defector is great, not my cup of tea. I don't really care about the content, but I admire the business. I admire the fact that they're trying to build something. I mean, 404, I think, is another one trying to do it. I don't know who they're serving. I couldn't tell you who their audience is, but they're trying to do it too. There's a lot of them out there that are various sizes, right? There's a free one, actually, an AMO reader, Payload. Payload went off and did the business of space that I thought about doing. They went and did it. I don't think they have any subscription business. They're all ads, but an ad for them could result in the sale of like a rocket engine, which is like a multi-million-dollar deal. And so like the ads can be pretty expensive, I'm sure. So lots of great publications.
Well, in that case, let me say, I appreciate you starting with brands that this audience probably hasn't heard of, because they are not places that I cite in the newsletter or that get tons of attention. And I appreciate you also, naming some of the better known ones. And I think more so than anything else, like I appreciate your like enthusiasm for the possibility of the whole sector, because the narrative generally has been the entire business, the future of journalism, all of this stuff is totally fucked. And I just simply say, or I just don't agree with that. And I tend to agree with what you said earlier, which is that the future business will look more like the old business, not necessarily in specific form factors, but just in the notion that you're serving more specific audiences that you could consider local, just not necessarily geographically local, and that you are going to give them a variety of different touch points within their areas of interest to glom onto and take part in.
Yeah, look, there are going to be a lot of people who lose jobs over the next couple of years. There's no denying it. We have a lot of people who are journalists, but whose job is to cover the same story that everyone else is covering. Do a Google search for Joe Biden and tell me how many stories you see that are identical.
That guy's supposed to be good, though, right? The Joe Biden guy, he's supposed to be good. We've heard of him.
I don't know who the Joe Biden guy is.
No, there's just a lot of people covering him, whoever he is.
A
lot of people on that story.
Okay, yeah. But my point is like how many media companies do you need writing the same story about Joe Biden, right? It's just you don't.
Yeah, of course.
But everyone feels the need to do it. Well, all those people are going to lose their jobs. At some point, we don't need that much content. And so what's going to wind up happening is journalists are going to have to make one of two choices. They're either going to have to get out of the business, which fine, or they're going to have to be comfortable with the fact that they have to specialize.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that, being a culture reporter in 2024 and writing about what someone did on social media is a stupid job. I don't need you to tell me what happened on social media. Social media told me what happened on social media. Learn how to read a P&L and then go be a business reporter.
Right.
You will have a job forever.
Or alternately, take your gift with words or your innate understanding of storytelling or your intrinsic ability to find interesting people and turn that into value in businesses that are not capital J journalism, but are built around storytelling and stuff. I mean,
do it as a solo operation, right? Like
sure.
Do it as a solo, and that's a fine thing. It's hard, right? Only the top 1% can really do it. It's an absolute pain in the ass. I'm pretty sure I had a fever on Monday because I was so exhausted. And because it sucks to be by yourself and build these things, but if that is what you want to do, if you want to focus on some obscure consumer topic and you can't find a publication to hire you to do it yourself. But media companies are going to get inherently smaller. It's just a fact.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, it's funny. I mean, that to certain ears, I'm sure sounds like a down note to end the conversation on since we've reached time. But to me, it's actually a positive one because it's pragmatic. Like we've been dealing in an ecosystem that ignored pragmatism for a long time, and we are coming back around to the notion of how these businesses run. And I appreciate the level of analysis that you put into it. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Ben. It was a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, listen, everybody. So Jacob Donnelly from A Media Operator, please, if you don't already know it, sign up and read the missives, what they're sent twice a week, 3 times a week.
So Tuesday goes to the full audience. Friday is for paid subscribers, and I've actually started bringing on freelance writers to write other stories that publish throughout the week. So I am actually looking for more freelance writers. So hit me up if you are one.
Cool. Well, and hit him up for sure. And then beyond that, the Media Operator event will happen again. What, fourth quarter this year, something like that?
It'll be in October. Yeah.
All right. So we'll all look out for that. But anyway, Jacob, thanks very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to following your growth and just generally like getting to know you better. So thank you.
Yeah, man. I appreciate the invite.
All right, cool. Talk soon.